He didn't lower his voice once. I was 4 feet behind him when he said it, still holding my clutch, still mid-step, coming back from the restroom, when his voice cut right through the noise of the entire restaurant and landed on me like a hand around my throat. Honestly, it's a little embarrassing. She picks up strangers, dirty laundry, like that's her whole thing. Imogen laughed. Not mean, just nervous. The kind of laugh that says, I don't agree, but I'm not going to fight you on it either. And Fletcher just kept going. That was the part that got me. He didn't stop at one sentence. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, completely comfortable, and said, I keep telling her to do something real. Something that actually sounds like something, you know? I didn't move. I don't know how long I stood there. 3 seconds, maybe 10. The restaurant was full. Oleander's always is on a Friday, and no one around me had any idea that the woman in the green dress standing near table 9 had just heard her husband of 4 years describe her life's work like it was a punchline he'd been quietly saving up. My name is Brooke Callister. I'm 29 years old. I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, and 6 years ago, I started a laundry pickup and delivery business called Fresh Fold out of a secondhand van and a storage unit I rented. With $400 I had scraped together waitressing double shifts. I now run 4 vans. I have 6 employees. I have a contract with 2 hotels, a dental group, and enough residential clients that I had to hire a dedicated scheduler last spring just to keep up with demand. I built that. Every single piece of it. While Fletcher was climbing the ladder at his commercial real estate firm, I was up at 5:15 every single morning, loading clean linen bags and answering client emails before the city was even awake. But at that dinner table, to his coworker, to whoever else had been listening, I was just the woman who touched other people's dirty clothes. I made myself walk back to the table. That was the hardest physical thing I have ever done inside a restaurant. Just putting one foot in front of the other and keeping my face completely, perfectly still. I sat down. I picked up my water glass. Fletcher looked over and gave me that easy, warm smile, the one that used to make me feel like the most important person in any room, and said, Hey, you good? Thought you got lost back there. I'm fine, I said. And I smiled back at him. If you've ever had to smile at someone right after they broke something in you, you already know exactly what that felt like. And if you're new here, please take 2 seconds right now and hit that subscribe button. It genuinely means everything to me, more than I know how to say. And I promise you, this story is only getting started. Imogen was watching me when I sat back down, not openly. Just in that careful way where someone keeps glancing over like they're waiting to see if you heard something you weren't supposed to hear. She looked down fast when I caught her eye. That one small thing told me everything I needed to know. She had been there. She had heard him say it. She had laughed along. And now she was sitting across from me, hoping I had been in that bathroom just a few seconds longer. I had not been in that bathroom a few seconds longer. I reached for the bread basket just to give my hand something to do. Fletcher had already moved on, talking about some deal his firm was trying to close, something about a warehouse property just outside of Atlanta. Imogen was nodding, asking follow-up questions, doing the whole engaged coworker performance. The table beside us was close, the way Oleander's always arranges them, and I was vaguely aware of a man sitting alone directly behind Fletcher, facing our direction. But I didn't focus on him yet. I was too busy sitting with a different question. How many times had Fletcher said that exact thing? To how many people? At how many dinners I hadn't been at how many work events where I was standing close but maybe not close enough. How many times had he laughed that easy laugh and called my business embarrassing to someone whose opinion actually mattered to him? That question sat in the middle of my chest, all the way through the appetizers. Then, Fletcher's phone buzzed flat on the table. He flipped it face up to check it. Casual, automatic, the way he always does. And I caught one single word on the screen before he tilted it slightly away from me. The word was Dale. I didn't know who Dale was yet. I would find out before that dinner was over. And when I did, every single thing about that night was going to look completely different than it did right now. The man behind Fletcher stood up 20 minutes later. He had been sitting alone the entire meal. No companion, no second glass ordered, just a quiet man in a dark blazer working through a plate of salmon and occasionally looking at his phone. I had glanced at him twice during dinner, but only the way you glance at any stranger in a crowded restaurant. He was unremarkable. Forgettable. That was before he stopped at our table on his way out. Fletcher Callister. Fletcher turned around in his chair and the color changed in his face. Not dramatically, not like in a movie. Just a small, fast shift. Like someone had turned a dial half a degree in the wrong direction. His jaw stayed in place, but something behind his eyes went very still. "Dale," Fletcher said. He stood up too quickly. His napkin fell off his lap and he didn't notice. I didn't see you over there." "Clearly," Dale said, and he smiled. But it wasn't warm. Dale Hurst was Fletcher's boss. Not his direct manager. His boss's boss. The man who had the final word on promotions, accounts. Everything that Fletcher had been quietly positioning himself toward for the past 2 years. I knew the name. I had heard it at home maybe a dozen times. Always in the context of something Fletcher was trying to impress. Some meeting he was preparing for. Some offhand comment he'd made about needing Dale to see him a certain way. Dale Hurst's opinion of Fletcher mattered more to Fletcher than almost anything else in his professional life. And Dale Hurst had been sitting directly behind us for the entire dinner. I watched Fletcher's face as that reality finished landing on him. It was like watching someone do silent arithmetic. How long had Dale been there? What had Dale heard? How much of it? "This is my wife," Fletcher said, turning to me with a smile so stiff it barely moved. "Brooke." "I know who Brooke is," Dale said. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not unkind, not warm, just steady and observant. "Fresh fold, right?" "My wife uses your service. Has for about 2 years now. She talks about it constantly. Says it's the best thing she's added to her week." I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched. "That's so good to hear," I said, and my voice came out completely calm. "I don't know how." Fletcher laughed. It came out about 3 notes too high. "Small world," he said. "Very small," Dale agreed. He looked at Fletcher for a moment. Just a moment. Just long enough. And then said, "Enjoy the rest of your evening." He nodded at me specifically, more than he nodded at Fletcher, and then he walked toward the exit and was gone. The table went silent. Imogen was looking at the tablecloth. Fletcher sat back down slowly and picked up his wine glass and took a long sip. I watched him do it. I watched the way his hand wasn't quite steady. I watched him set the glass down and then pick up his fork like he was going to keep eating and then put the fork back down again. "Well," he said finally, "that was a surprise." "Was it?" I said, not a question. Just 2 words, very flat, very even. He looked at me, and for the first time all evening, I saw something flicker in his expression that wasn't casual or comfortable or easy. It was the look of a man who is trying to figure out exactly how much trouble he is in and how quickly he needs to start managing it. "Brooke." "I'm fine," I said. Again, same 2 words as before, same tone. He nodded slowly. Imogen asked if anyone wanted dessert, and the conversation moved on, and I sat there with my water glass and kept my face completely still and thought about one thing. Dale Hurst had been at that table before us. He'd been there when we arrived, which meant he had been there the entire time Fletcher was talking. Fletcher didn't know what Dale had heard, but I did. I had been standing right behind my husband when he said every word of it. And now I was the only person at this table who knew exactly how much damage had just been done, and exactly how to use it. The drive home was quiet in a way that had weight to it. Fletcher drove. I watched the streetlights pass through the passenger window and didn't say anything, and neither did he for the first 10 minutes. Then he exhaled through his nose, that long, slow exhale he does when he's building up to something, and said, I owe you an apology. I turned and looked at him. What I said earlier, he said, keeping his eyes on the road. About your work. That wasn't fair. That wasn't right. I don't actually think that, Brooke. I was just, I don't know, trying to be funny, maybe. It came out wrong. I let the silence sit for a few seconds before I said anything. Trying to be funny for who? I asked. He shifted in his seat. For Imogen. She and I have that kind of dynamic at work. We just kind of riff on things. It doesn't mean anything. You called my business embarrassing. I know, and I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. He said it quietly, and he said it genuinely. And if I hadn't been standing 4 feet away, watching the easy confidence in his body when he said it the first time, if I hadn't seen the way he leaned back in that chair, like a man completely comfortable with his own opinion, maybe I would have let it land as a real apology. Maybe I would have accepted it and gone to bed and woken up the next morning and decided it was one bad moment and not a pattern. But I had been standing there, and I had seen his face. Okay, I said. Okay, he repeated. Yeah, okay. He glanced over. He wanted more than that. I could feel it. He wanted me to say I forgive you, or it's okay, or some version of reassurance that meant he could stop holding his breath. I didn't give it to him. I turned back to the window and watched the rest of the drive go by. The next 2 days were almost normal. Almost. Fletcher was attentive in that careful way people are when they know they've done something, and they're not sure if it's been fully forgiven yet. He made coffee in the mornings without being asked. He asked about my day like he actually wanted the answer. He didn't mention Dale once, which told me Dale was living somewhere very loud inside his head. I let him be careful. I didn't push anything. I went to work, ran my routes, checked in with my team, answered my emails. On Saturday afternoon, my best friend Viveka came over and sat at my kitchen counter, and I told her everything. The restaurant, the words, Dale's appearance, the drive home, and she listened without interrupting, which for Viveka is an extraordinary act of self-control. When I finished, she said, okay, so he got caught. He got caught, I said, and you haven't decided what to do yet. No, she wrapped both hands around her mug. Do you think it's the first time he said something like that? I looked at her. No, I said. I really don't. And that was the thing I had been sitting with all weekend. Not the words themselves. Not even the humiliation of hearing them in the middle of that restaurant. But the ease of it. The complete, total ease. Men don't talk like that for the first time in public. They talk like that in public when it's already a comfortable thing to say in private. On Sunday evening, Fletcher's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. The screen lit up face side, and I wasn't trying to read it. I was just standing there refilling my water glass. But the name on the notification was Dale, and the first line of the message was visible, and it said, "We need to talk about the Ardmore account before," and then the screen went dark. I stood at the counter with my water glass, and I thought about that. The Ardmore account was the biggest thing Fletcher's firm had been working toward for months. Fletcher had mentioned it in passing several times, always as something that was practically his, practically done, practically confirmed. If Dale was texting him on a Sunday evening about needing to talk before something, that something had a deadline, and deadlines had a way of making people very vulnerable. I didn't touch his phone. I went back to the living room and sat down and picked up my book. But I had stopped reading about 3 pages ago, and I wasn't starting again now. Something was shifting. I could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Nothing you can point to exactly, just a stillness that doesn't feel like calm. Monday morning, Fletcher left for work 40 minutes earlier than usual. He said there was a meeting. He kissed me on the cheek. A real kiss, not a distracted one, and said he'd text me later. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the car back out of the driveway, and then I sat down with my coffee and thought very carefully about everything I knew. Dale Hurst's wife had been a Freshfold client for 2 years. That meant there was a real, existing relationship between Dale's household and my business. That meant Dale didn't just hear Fletcher call my work embarrassing as an abstraction. He heard it as a comment about something his own wife valued and used and talked about. That landed differently. That was personal in a direction Fletcher hadn't anticipated. I called Viveka at 8:15. "I need to know what I actually want out of this," I said. "What do you mean?" "I mean, before I do anything, I need to be clear on what I'm actually trying to accomplish. Because there are two different versions of this, and they lead to very different places." Viveka was quiet for a moment. "Are you thinking about leaving him?" "I'm thinking about a lot of things." "Okay," she said slowly. "Walk me through what you know for sure." What I knew for sure was this. Fletcher had spoken about me with contempt to a coworker in a public place, comfortably, without hesitation, with no awareness that I might hear it. That meant it was not a one-time slip. People don't speak with that kind of ease about something they've only thought once. Somewhere along the way, Brooke's little laundry thing had become a character in the story Fletcher told about himself. The successful real estate professional with the wife who does something small and slightly embarrassing. I had been a punchline he carried around without me knowing. And then there was the Ardmore account. I did something I almost never do. I called Freshfold's hotel client, the Meridian downtown, and asked for the front desk manager I'd worked with for the past 3 years. Her name was Constance, and she knew everybody in Savannah's business community, the way certain women just do. Quietly, completely, without making a thing of it. I asked her, very casually, what she knew about the Ardmore development project. She was quiet for 2 seconds. Then she said, "Honey, that project just lost its lead investor last week. They're scrambling. Whoever closes that account in the next 10 days is going to look like a miracle worker to everybody watching." I thanked her and hung up. I sat with that for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and I wrote an email. I didn't send it immediately. I sat with it, reread it 3 times, changed 2 sentences, and then sat with it again. It was addressed to Dalehurst. I had found his professional email through the firm's public website. The email was short, and it was professional, and it was very, very specific. It said that I understood his wife had been a Freshfold client for 2 years, and that I was grateful for her trust in my business. It said that I had been quietly exploring a commercial partnership opportunity for Freshfold, specifically a linen and uniform care contract with the kind of mid-size corporate developments that often lack dedicated vendors. It said I had reason to believe the Ardmore project might benefit from a service conversation, and that I would welcome the chance to speak with him directly at his convenience. I did not mention Fletcher once. I read it one more time, then I hit send. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me a little. I had expected to feel nervous. Some flutter of doubt, some second-guessing. Instead, I just felt clear. Like something that had been slightly out of focus for years had finally sharpened into a clean, exact line. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a Savannah number I didn't recognize. I picked up. "Brooke Callister?" the voice said. "Yes, this is Dalehurst. I got your email. I have to say, your timing is interesting." There was something in the way he said interesting. Not suspicious. Not dismissive. Something much closer to impressed. I leaned against my kitchen counter, and I said, "I tend to move when the moment is right." "Clearly," he said, and this time when he said it, it didn't sound the same way it had sounded at the restaurant at all. We scheduled a meeting for Wednesday morning. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a full minute, just breathing. Fletcher had a meeting with Dale, too. I was almost certain of it. And now so did I, except mine was first, and mine had nothing to do with Fletcher at all. Wednesday morning, I got up at 5:15. The same time I always get up. The same time I had been getting up since the very beginning, since the storage unit and the secondhand van, and the $400, and the double shifts that came before all of it. I made coffee, checked my driver schedules, answered 3 client emails, and then put on the best blazer I own. Deep navy, fitted, the one Viveka always says, makes me look like someone who has already won before she walks into the room. And I drove downtown. Dale's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Bull Street, glass-fronted and quiet on a Wednesday morning. His assistant walked me in at 9 sharp. Dale was already standing when I entered, which I noted. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk, and we both sat down, and he looked at me with that same steady, unreadable expression he'd had at Oleander's. Except this time there was something added to it. Something that looked like curiosity. "Your email was well-timed," he said. "The Ardmore Group had a vendor gap that's been causing headaches for 3 weeks. Linen supply, uniform care, laundry logistics for the on-site staff. Nothing glamorous, but it's been holding things up. I can solve that in 72 hours, I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You're confident." "I have 4 vans, 6 trained staff, 2 hotel contracts, and a track record I can document completely. Confidence is just accuracy in this case." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "Brooke," he said, "I'm going to ask you something directly, and I'd like you to answer me directly." "Okay." "Friday night at Oleander's, did you hear what your husband said before you came back to the table?" I held his gaze. "Yes," I said, "every word." He nodded slowly. "I want you to know that it affected my assessment. Not of you, of him. A man who speaks about his wife's work that way in public tells me something about his judgment, about what he values. That's relevant to me when I'm thinking about who I trust with a significant account." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just let that sit. "The Ardmore account is Fletcher's primary target right now," I said. Not a question. "It was," Dale said carefully. "And now?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Now, I have a meeting with him at 11, and I had a meeting with you at 9, and those 2 facts are going to inform a decision I'll be making by end of day." I left Dale's office at 9:52. I sat in my car for a moment before starting it. Not celebrating, not replaying. Just sitting with the strange, clean feeling of having walked into a room completely as myself and walked back out the same way. Fletcher texted me at 10:34. "Heading into a big meeting, wish me luck." I looked at the message for a few seconds. Then I typed back, "You've got this." I meant it. I genuinely meant it. Not sarcastically, not strategically. Whatever happened in that meeting was Fletcher's to face. I had built something real, and I had walked it into a room and let it speak for itself. That was mine. That had nothing to do with him anymore. Dale called me Thursday morning. Freshfold got the Ardmore contract. A 12-month agreement for full linen and uniform care services across the development staff, worth more in the first year than anything I had signed before. He said the decision had been straightforward once he reviewed my documentation. He didn't say anything else about Fletcher. He didn't have to. Fletcher came home Thursday evening, quieter than I had seen him in a long time. He sat at the kitchen counter while I was finishing up some route planning, and he said, "Dale gave the Ardmore account to an outside vendor, some service company. I don't really understand it." I kept my eyes on my laptop. "That's frustrating," I said. "I'm sorry." He nodded. He poured himself a glass of water. He stood there for a moment and then said, quietly, "You know, I'm proud of what you've built, right?" "I don't think I say that enough." I looked up at him then. Really looked. And I thought about the restaurant, and the easy laugh, and the word embarrassing spoken to a coworker without a single hesitation. And I thought about 5:15 in the morning, and the storage unit, and the $400. "You should say it more," I said. And I went back to my work. That's the thing about building something real. It doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. It doesn't need to be called impressive at a dinner table to be worth something. It was worth something before anyone was watching. It'll be worth something long after that dinner is forgotten. If this story sat with you the way it sat with me, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And leave me a comment. Tell me what you would have done in that restaurant. I read every single one.